We go to nature to escape, to breathe, to feel free. The woods, the mountains, the sea, they welcome us until they don't. Because out there, beyond the last trail marker, something watches. And when it moves, there's no help, no one to hear you scream. Tonight's stories are true. Each begins in a place where people felt free and ends in a place where they were never found. Have you ever been camping in winter? That deep silence when snow absorbs all sound, the sharp bite of cold air in your lungs. It's beautiful, isn't it? Until it's not. Tonight, I want to tell you about 9 hikers who ventured into the Russian mountains and encountered something that made them flee their tent into sub-zero temperatures without proper clothing. Something worse than certain death by freezing. February 1959, the northern Ural mountains of Russia. A group of 9 experienced hikers and ski tourists, 7 men and 2 women, all university students or graduates, embark on a challenging expedition to reach Otorten Mountain. Led by Igor Dyatlov, they were all skilled mountaineers, well equipped to handle the harsh Siberian winter. On their final night, February 1st, they set up camp on the slope of a mountain called Kolatyakl, which in the local Mansi language means dead mountain. The weather was deteriorating, but nothing these seasoned hikers couldn't handle. What happened that night has baffled investigators for decades. When the group failed to return, a rescue party was sent. What they found defied explanation. The search team discovered their tent on February 26th. It was abandoned but still standing, partially covered by snow. Here's where things get disturbing. The tent hadn't collapsed in a storm or been buried in an avalanche. It had been cut open from the inside. 9 sets of footprints led from the tent down the mountain slope, some in socks, some barefoot, none in proper winter boots. The footprints showed they had walked away deliberately, not running in panic. About a mile downhill, beneath an old cedar tree, the first 2 bodies were found. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko were barefoot and dressed only in underwear. Their hands were burned, and there was evidence they had desperately tried to climb the tree. Nearby were the remains of a small fire. The next 3 bodies, Dyatlov, Zina Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin, were found at various points between the tree and the tent, positioned as if they were attempting to return to camp. All had died of hypothermia, but Slobodin also had a fractured skull. It took 2 more months to find the remaining 4. They were located in a ravine under 4 meters of snow, further into the forest. These victims told an even more horrifying story. Nikolai Thibaut Brignol had severe skull damage. Alexander Kolevatov had unnatural neck injuries. Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue, eyes, part of her lips, and facial tissue. Alexander Zolotaryov had major chest fractures that doctors compared to injuries from a high-speed car crash. Yet there was no external trauma. Most baffling was that the force required to cause such injuries would be tremendous, yet there was no corresponding damage to soft tissue. One doctor described it as if they had been crushed by pressure, but not by any physical blow. The official Soviet investigation concluded that the hikers died from a compelling natural force. The case was classified and sealed, When files were finally opened decades later, investigators found more disturbing details. The hiker's clothing showed traces of radioactive contamination. Several experienced climbers on the rescue team noted that the footprints from the tent were consistent with people walking in an orderly fashion, not fleeing in terror. Witnesses from the Mansi tribe reported seeing strange orange spheres in the sky above the mountains that night. Similar sightings were reported by Weather Service employees and even the military. The lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, later admitted he had been ordered to remove any references to flying spheres from his report. In a 1990 interview, he stated, "I suspected at the time and am almost sure now that these bright flying spheres had a direct connection to the group's death." Even more unsettling were the final photographs found in the hikers' cameras. The last frame showed a blurry, tall figure moving among the trees at the edge of their camp. Analysis decades later couldn't identify if it was human or animal, only that it stood approximately 8 feet tall. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of the most perplexing mysteries in modern history. The Russian government reopened the case in 2019, concluding that an avalanche was to blame, though this explanation fails to account for the radioactivity, the strange injuries, or why experienced mountaineers would cut their way out of a tent rather than using the entrance. To this day, experienced hikers in the Urals report the same thing. When camping near Kolatsiakhl, they can't shake the feeling of being watched from the tree line, especially on clear, cold nights when strange lights dance above the mountain peaks. National parks are America's greatest treasures, vast protected wilderness where we can reconnect with nature. But rangers will tell you something they don't put in the brochures. Every year, people vanish in these parks without a trace, often in circumstances that defy logical explanation. June 1969, Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The Martin family was enjoying their annual Father's Day camping trip. 6-year-old Dennis Martin was playing hide-and-seek with other children near Spence Field, a grassy meadow surrounded by dense forest. His father, William, watched as Dennis scampered behind a bush, planning to surprise the other children. When the children emerged from hiding, Dennis was gone. William wasn't concerned at first. The bush wasn't large enough to conceal the child for long. But after calling Dennis's name repeatedly with no response, panic set in. Within minutes, 16 family members were searching the immediate area. What followed was the largest search operation in the park's history. Over 1,400 people, including Green Berets, FBI agents, National Guard troops, and local volunteers, combed the area for 2 weeks. Bloodhounds lost Dennis's scent just 100 yards from where he vanished. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist. What makes Dennis's disappearance particularly disturbing are the inconsistencies and strange reports that emerged during the search. The day Dennis vanished, approximately 4 miles from Spence Field, another family, the Keys, were hiking when they heard an enormous, sickening scream. Mr. Keys described seeing a large, dark figure moving through the underbrush, carrying what appeared to be a small child or animal. He reported this to a park ranger immediately, but this lead wasn't properly followed up for days because communication between search teams was poor. The FBI became unusually involved for what should have been a standard missing persons case. Harold Key was interviewed multiple times about what he saw, and family members later claimed that officials instructed them not to speak about certain aspects of the search. Park Ranger James Burnett, who participated in the search, later wrote in his personal journal, only discovered after his death in 1987, that several searchers found unusual tracks in areas where no one should have been. Not animal prints, not human footprints, but something he described as narrow impressions, like someone walking on the sides of their feet. More disturbing were the reports of other children who had been playing with Dennis. 7-year-old Doug Pardue told his parents he saw a man with no face watching them from the trees just before Dennis disappeared. Adults dismissed this as a child's imagination. The Green Berets who participated in the search used unusual equipment not typically employed in rescue operations. When questioned, the official response was they were training with new tools. Local hunters familiar with the terrain reported finding circular clearings in the dense forest where all vegetation had been flattened, areas that hadn't existed before the search began. 2 months after Dennis vanished, a partial human skeleton was found 12 miles from Spence Field, an impossible distance for a 6-year-old to travel through some of the most rugged terrain in the Appalachians. The remains were never officially identified. What many don't know is that Dennis's case fits a disturbing pattern documented by former park ranger and search and rescue expert David Paulides, who has catalogued hundreds of similar disappearances across national parks. These cases share eerie similarities. Victims vanish in seconds, often while in view of others, or just slightly ahead on a trail. Search dogs can't track them or act strangely when trying. Bodies, if found, are discovered in areas previously searched multiple times, sometimes missing shoes or specific articles of clothing. And most commonly, they're found in locations that would have been physically impossible for the victim to reach, especially children. In Dennis's case, the FBI collected all search documents and photographs. Freedom of Information Act requests for these files have been consistently denied, with officials claiming the records were lost in a flood. The Martin family reported being followed for years after the incident and believed their phones were tapped. Before his death in 2014, William Martin revealed something he'd kept secret for decades. During the search, a retired forest ranger pulled him aside and told him, "This isn't the first time this has happened here. There are places in these mountains where people just disappear." Today, a small marker is the only evidence of Dennis Martin's brief existence. The National Park Service has since established stricter protocols for missing person cases, though they deny there's anything unusual about disappearances in the parks. If you hike in Great Smoky Mountains National Park, locals will warn you to stay on marked trails and keep children close, especially near Spence Field, where hikers still report the sensation of being watched and occasionally the sound of a child laughing just beyond the tree line. How many of you have gone swimming in the ocean? And how many have gone diving? There's something both beautiful and terrifying about being underwater. That weightlessness, the silence, the feeling of being in an alien world. Tonight, I want to tell you about a man who documented his own death in the place divers call the Blue Hole, and what his final footage revealed. April 28, 2000. The Blue Hole, a submarine sinkhole off the coast of Dahab, Egypt. At approximately 140 meters deep, it's known among divers as one of the most dangerous dive sites in the world. Nicknamed the Divers' Cemetery, it has claimed over 130 lives since records began. Yuri Lipsky, a 22-year-old Russian-Israeli diving instructor, arrived that morning for what should have been a routine dive. Though experienced, he was not qualified for the extreme depth of the Blue Hole. He carried with him a helmet-mounted video camera to record the experience. What makes this story unique is that we know exactly what happened to Yuri. Unlike most diving tragedies where we can only speculate, Yuri filmed his entire descent, including his final moments. The video begins normally. Crystal blue water, schools of fish. Yuri's breathing is steady through his regulator. He descends along the wall of the Blue Hole, occasionally turning to wave at other divers. At around 80 meters, already far deeper than recreational diving limits, the tenor of the footage changes. Yuri's breathing becomes more rapid. The narcotic effect of nitrogen under pressure, known as nitrogen narcosis, begins to affect his judgment. This condition, which divers call the martini effect, impairs reasoning and creates a false sense of security. As he continues descending, the blue water gradually darkens. At 110 meters, he reaches what divers call the Arch, a tunnel that connects the Blue Hole to the open sea. This is where many divers before him have died, attempting to swim through the arch without proper equipment or training. The footage shows Yuri's gauges, his air supply diminishing faster than it should. His breathing becomes erratic. He attempts to inflate his buoyancy control device to ascend, but something is wrong. Instead of rising, he continues sinking. At this depth, panic is fatal. The increased pressure affects his ability to think clearly. The camera captures his gloved hands coming into frame, movements becoming increasingly frantic as he struggles with his equipment. Then comes the moment that haunts viewers of the footage. Yuri seems to see something below him in the darkness. The camera tilts downward. There's nothing visible to us but deep blue fading to black. Yet Yuri's body language changes completely. He stops struggling momentarily, as if transfixed by whatever he's seeing. What happens next is disputed among diving experts who have analyzed the footage. Some claim Yuri's regulator failed. Others believe he suffered from oxygen toxicity, causing a seizure. But a third group notes something stranger. Yuri appears to deliberately remove his regulator, almost in a trance-like state, while staring into the depths below. As consciousness fades, the camera captures Yuri's final descent. His body sinks to the bottom, the footage continuing to record as he lies motionless. And then, something moves in the frame. The official investigation concluded that what appears in the final minutes of footage is simply silt being disturbed or marine life investigating. But 3 separate digital analysis experts have noted unusual anomalies in the final 7 minutes of recording. shadows that move against prevailing currents and what appear to be slender, elongated shapes that don't match known marine species in the region. Yuri's body was recovered the next day by another diver, Tarek Omar, who specializes in recovering the dead from the blue hole. When interviewed, Omar made a curious statement. In 20 years of recovery dives, this was the only body I found that was positioned like that. When pressed to elaborate, he would only say, "Most who die in the blue hole are found facing up, trying to reach the surface. Yuri was facing down, arms extended forward, as if reaching for something below." More disturbing is what happened to the recovery team. Of the 3 divers who retrieved Yuri's body and equipment, 2 have since died in separate diving incidents. The third, Omar, refuses to dive the blue hole anymore. Local Bedouin guides have long warned about the blue hole. They believe it is a dwelling place for jinn, supernatural creatures who lure divers deeper with visions of underwater caves filled with air where they can breathe freely. Many experienced divers who survived close calls in the blue hole report hallucinations of exactly this, seeing what appeared to be air pockets or caves below them, compelling them to dive deeper. Yuri's camera was returned to his family, who later allowed it to be used in diving safety videos. The full, unedited footage has never been released to the public. Those segments are available online. The blue hole continues to claim lives almost every year, despite increased warnings and restrictions. Diving experts maintain that these deaths are simply the result of overconfidence and the unique, deceptive conditions of the site. But those who have dived the blue hole and lived tell a different story, of an inexplicable pull downward, of time seeming to slow, and of the unsettling feeling that in the deepest part of the hole, something is looking back up at them. These stories remind us that nature isn't always benevolent. The wilderness, whether mountain, forest, or ocean, operates by its own rules, indifferent to our presence. Sometimes, the greatest horror isn't what we know is out there, but what remains unexplained. Next time you're hiking a mountain trail, walking through dense forest, or swimming in deep waters, remember, we are always visitors in these places, and sometimes the wilderness doesn't want us there at all.